Alright, what's going on, guys? So recently I've had some pretty good questions in the comment section talking about how I identify fish. So if you're not familiar with my channel, I am mostly a multi-species and a life listing channel, which essentially means I'm trying to catch as many different species as I can, and preferably species that I've never caught before at any point in my life. So what usually ends up happening, one of two things. Either one, I go out and I target a specific species, and if that happens, I usually know the characteristics of the fish, so once I catch it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the one I was after. But the other thing that happens is I might go out there and catch a fish I've never caught before, and by just looking at it, I'm not sure exactly what it is, either because I have literally no idea, or because there's a lot of species out there that look pretty similar, and there's very, very minor characteristic changes between the species that identifies them, and I just don't have all those characteristics and all those species memorized. There's something like, I believe, 28 or 30,000 different fish species worldwide. Obviously, I'm not going to encounter all those, but even just here in Florida, if you combine the freshwater and saltwater, you're probably knocking on the door of 1,000, right? So what usually ends up happening, I'll take a good picture of it, and then after a fact, I'll go back and I'll confirm the ID. So the question was related to the resources that I use to identify the fish. Most of the resources that I use are right behind me here. This is kind of my personal library. Most of these are fish identification books, but not all. There's some other miscellaneous books in there from other hobbies I have and whatnot. But what I would like to do is take maybe some time over the next couple of weeks and put out some videos that review some of the books that I use and give you kind of a little insight to how I identify some of these fish. So this is going to be video one of what I believe is going to be a series of these book reviews, and today what we're going to talk about is this book right here. So this is The Fishes of the Freshwater of Florida, an identification guide and an atlas. So this has 222 different species listed inside here, all of which are found in the freshwater in Florida. So it has all the freshwater species, obviously, but it also includes a lot of, not a lot, but some, let's say, saltwater species that also venture into freshwater at some point in their lives. It has all the native species found in Florida, at least I believe all the native species, and a very good amount of the non-native species. And when it comes to the non-native species, it has all the commonly found non-native species. There are people out there that every once in a while they will catch a species that is not listed in the book, and that's mainly just because they're very rare. But this one has almost all the species you're going to encounter on a regular basis. So it is an excellent book. What I would like to do now is kind of show you the inside of it. We'll go over a couple of the things that I look for when I'm identifying fish, and then we'll talk about what I like and also maybe don't like about this book. But let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright, so let's jump right into the book. So, Fishes in the Freshwaters of Florida. Obviously, it starts out like any other book. You're going to have your table of contents here. So if you know the species you're looking after, you can just kind of look it up real quick here. But then we get into the introduction section. Now, this talks about a lot of the history of the freshwaters in Florida, a little bit about the drainages and whatnot, the different waterways within the state, the distribution of the fishes within different drainages, and then this chart is actually pretty good. It's essentially the species or the family, and it's crossed with the different drainages. So if you're fishing a particular drainage and you caught a fish, you can just kind of look at this real quick to see if the species like you think that you caught is even found in that drainage. Or you can do it the other way, which is the way I do it a lot, is I'll look for a particular species that I want to catch, and then I'll see if it is found in, or what drainages it is found in. And then I can start doing research on fishing spots in that drainage if I want to find a particular species. So two ways you can use this chart. If we keep flipping through the introduction, this is kind of where the fish identification part of the book comes in. Because to be able to identify a lot of these fish, and I'll show you that later on, you've got to know a couple, I guess these are somewhat science-y words. Most people, or most fishermen will probably know these already, but you've got to know what like a dorsal fin is, anal fin, caudal fin, adipose fin. That's going to become pretty important later on. But if you don't know, now you do. Also lateral line, how to count the scales below and above the lateral line, that sort of thing. Gill rakers, and this is something I'm not good at. I don't look that deep into the gills of the fish when I'm trying to identify them, even though I'm sure it would help at times. But let's keep flipping through this. Each fish is going to have one of these maps next to it, and it's going to show you just kind of general points where the fish was sampled in. So this appears to be the records of all the fish species, and it looks like it's 65,000 of them, which is a lot. And then we got the different families of fish. So this is a pretty good starting point. If you're not sure where to even look, you can just kind of look at your fish and see if it looks similar to any of these fish. Like let's say you caught a species of sunfish. This is a bluegill, but you could probably look at your fish, see if it looks similar to this. Maybe it's a spotted sunfish or a red ear sunfish. So you can see, hey, it looks kind of like that, but not completely like that. Let me go to page 259 and look at the sunfish family and see if I can find my fish there. And then anyway, once we get into the actual species, the pages look like this. So first one is going to be the lampreys. It's got pretty good detailed pictures of the lamprey or the species in question. Each one is going to have one of these maps of where the species is found. So this one looks like it's essentially just found on the panhandle. And it also has a map of where the species is found within the United States as a whole, not just in Florida. And it has the identifying marks. A lot of the really good identifying marks are bolded. It has similar species and also habitat. So I'm not going to go over every single fish species. This is obviously the first one, so that's kind of where we started. But I did pick one out that I actually kind of thought was pretty good, that helped me a few months ago. So we're on the shiners. So this is the coastal shiner. So if you just kind of look at the picture and look at the next picture, which is a weed shiner, these things look essentially identical, at least to the untrained eye. And my eye was untrained when I was looking at these fish a few months ago. So I caught a fish, wasn't sure what it was, and then had to hit the books. So if you look at the identification, one of the points that's pretty obvious, it's bolded here. So all rays of the anal fin are lined with black. When you look at the picture, you can see all the rays of the anal fin right there are lined with black. Then you can hop over to the weed shiner. Same thing, posterior 3 to 4 anal rays are lined with black. Look at the picture, and it is just the posterior 3 or 4 anal rays. It's not all the anal rays. So these very little minute details of the fish, like when you first look at it, they do look identical. But once you get down to it, they do have some pretty clear differences. And you just got to know what to look for, and that's essentially what this book does. If you don't know what to look for, it's extremely difficult. But once you just read some of these main points here, it's fairly easy to actually be able to identify them, as long as you have really good pictures. That's the thing I struggle with sometimes. I'll catch a fish, I think I got a good picture, but then when I get home to actually look at it, the characteristic feature that I'm looking for is not actually visible in the picture. But there's one of the fish species, or I guess types of fish I wanted to highlight. I'd like to also now move on. I got a couple of these pages bookmarked here. Next one I wanted to talk about is here. So these are some non-native species. So green swordtail, these are live bears. Green swordtail, southern platy, and variable platy. So I've only caught the variable platy. I have not caught the southern or the green swordtail. But one of the good things about these maps is that it doesn't give you exact points, but it does give you general starting points. So I've never caught a green swordtail, but from this, it appears like the Tampa area has a pretty good concentration of these guys, and I've never fished the Tampa area. So if I was really wanted one of these guys, that's kind of where I would probably start doing my research. Seems like they're actually in Vero Beach a little bit, so that's actually a point that I tried to fish once, and I ended up failing miserably at getting green swordtails, but they're definitely more concentrated in the Tampa area, so that's another way I like to use this book. Just kind of a general starting point to find locations where these fish might be, and sometimes you'll get lucky, and sometimes you'll be like me in Vero Beach where you will not find them at all. If you look at the southern platy, same thing, looks like to be somewhat common in Tampa, and then a couple other points along the eastern coast. Have not found that on variable platyfish. Probably the same thing. Looks like that's a pretty good concentration. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that's right on Gainesville. There's a lot of points right there, and I've never fished it, but I think the University of Florida campus has these on their campus, if I'm not mistaken. So that's probably where those are. And then a couple other things I wanted to point out. Let's see. Oh, this is the page I wanted to look at. So the snooks. So snooks, oftentimes they're considered, I guess, a saltwater species. But this book only has 4 snook, and I'm not exactly sure, but I believe there's actually 5 snook found in Florida. I think the fat snook has recently been split into a small scale and a large scale fat snook. But anyway, so snook, they look really similar. I've tried posting these on like Facebook groups to see if someone could identify them, and usually they just tell me it's a snook. Most people I don't think even know that there's different species of snooks, and they all have very minute differences. But again, they're highlighted very nicely in black, so you can see, like on this one, you might have to count the scales above the lateral line. So for a sword spine, it's 49 to 59. Looks like for a fat snook between 79 and 92, and we can look at those later on maybe, but just very small differences. But this book highlights it very easily, and you can look at the pictures as well, which helps a lot. And let's see, where's page 310? 310. Oh, the darters. So I love darters, and I have just not really caught too many of them. There's not that many that are found in this part of the state. If you look at the maps on almost all of these, most of these are going to be kind of in North Florida on the Panhandle, and there's actually just so many darters found in Florida, but all of them are essentially found on the Panhandle. I believe swamp darter, this one, is the only one that's found essentially all over the state, and I've never run across them. So at some point what I want to do is take a trip up to like North Florida, and this book would come in real handy when I'm looking for all these different darters, and at least giving me starting points of where I could probably start looking for them. But there's just so many darters all over the place, and they all look super similar, so I'm not sure how I would be able to identify them without this book. And then there's one more thing I wanted to show you before we start wrapping it up. It was somewhere toward the back here. Is this it? Yeah, 430. So we're in the appendix now. I mentioned that this book has a lot of non-native species, but it has a lot of the commonly found non-native species like those green swordtails, platyfish, and whatnot. But listed here are a lot of non-native species that are not established. So they've been caught in Florida. It's just, at least according to this book, there are no reproducing populations of those fish. So it is possible that you'll go out there and you'll catch a fish that's not in this book. It might just not be super common like some of these species are. But that's essentially going to do it for the book. We got more of an appendix and whatnot, just like any other book. So let me take a minute and let's wrap up what I think about this book. Alright, so Fishes in the Freshwaters of Florida, an identification guide and atlas. I think it is an excellent book. I've got a lot of fish identification books, and I think this is one of the better ones. It only covers the state of Florida, which is nice because it's extremely detailed for the number of species it has. There's some other books here that cover a much larger area, and they're the same size. So they have a lot more species in them, but they have the same amount of pages. So this one just has a lot more information per species. You saw the information it has. It has 222 fish species, which is basically everything you're going to encounter in Florida. You got to be really lucky to catch something in Florida's freshwaters that is not covered in this book. It has the maps for where they're found. It has a lot of really good identifying marks, which is really simple to follow and to tell your fish apart from the other fish species that are similar to it. Of course, given that you have the right pictures, which is usually my problem, but just take some good pictures and then it'll tell you everything you need to know to be able to tell that fish apart from any of the other species that look really similar to it. And this is, I can't say enough good things about this book. It's slightly pricey, but all these books are. But yeah, it's excellent. This has helped me identify countless fish, and it's helped me find countless fish based on the maps. And it's just an excellent book. So if you're interested in it, I'm going to put a link down in the description. Take a look at it. I think it is well worth it, and you'll be identifying some Florida fish here in no time. So hope you guys liked it, and I will see you next time.